Konnichiwa everyone, today we're going to do something kind of fun. We are going to make a version of a Japanese planing beam. Now if you're not familiar with a Japanese planing beam, don't worry, I'm going to try my best to explain it. Basically a planing beam is a beam that you put on two sticks that you support with its own weight. You butt it up against the wall. And the reason you do that is because when you have an angle like this, it makes planing with a Japanese plane a little bit easier. Now since Japanese planes cut on the pull stroke, the whole concept of this is to have this elevated slightly at an angle so that when you cut, you're actually cutting with a downward motion as well, so that you're not just planing a flat surface. This makes it easier to rough out boards, especially if you've got some really hard sawn, or not hard sawn, what's the word I'm looking for? Really rough sawn boards that you have to smooth up. It lets you push harder because you're actually pulling back towards yourself and you're using gravity as your friend. But we're just going to use some basic kiln dried, I think this is Doug fir. Anyway, whatever this is, we're going to use it. It's going to work nicely. This thing's going to be a little heavier than most of the things I build here on the channel, but you know what? You got to push yourself a little bit sometimes, and you got to make something cool. I've got a neat little vise that we're going to use on this too, so this is not going to be a traditional Japanese planing beam in any sense of the word. It's going to be a cool project, I hope, and wanted to show you guys a neat little thing I've been doing lately. I actually picked up this sort of a Mario hammer looking thing. I think it's a dead blow of some kind. It's got a brass face, mostly rubber. But the handle is actually kind of dry when I got it. So rather than just coat it in Danish oil, one of the things I've been using is this stuff, just some butcher block conditioner. If you think about it, this stuff is going on a open, unsealed piece of wood most of the time. You don't usually finish butcher blocks unless you're just crazy like that. Apply a little bit liberally on top. Whoa! Oh! Oh, wow. You just kind of apply it generously on your handles here, and you get a nice kind of a sheen. And the beeswax and the oils in this helps to just condition the wood, keep it healthier, doesn't dry it out so quickly. And I'm just going to put a little bit here. Yeah, that's just a little tip for you, just in case you got a bunch of old tools that need a little love. You don't have to use Danish oil, and you don't even have to use this, but this is just a way to keep them looking good and keep the wood from drying out and giving you splinters on down the road. So anyway, on to the main event. So according to the research I've done, a typical planing beam was about a 5x5 or a 6x6 beam, and you have another little bit added on right here for edge planing, kind of like a shooting board, I guess, that's built in. May or may not do that, I haven't made up my mind just yet. But to give you guys an idea of scale, this is going to be about 7 feet long end to end, 6 inches wide, about 5.5 inch deep, and just in case you didn't know, a 2x6 and a 2x4 actually is not exactly 2 inches by 4 inches or 2 inches by 6 inches. That's all approximate. I saw this thing where there's actually a lawsuit going on where someone is angry that the 2x4 they purchased wasn't a 2x4. Not sure how that happened. I actually blame the fact that they took shop class out of high school, but you know what? No one's going to listen to me when I say these kind of things, because if common sense were common, we wouldn't call it common sense. But anyway, it's going to be about 7 feet long, 6 inches wide, about 5.5 inches deep. Going to be hefty as all get out, but you know what? That's the point of this thing. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So because it's hotter than the surface of friggin' Hades outside, I'm actually going to do some of the assembly of this indoors to save myself the sweat and the agony of working in 120 degree heat. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually glue this up in sections, because this thing is a lot longer than my current bench that I've got going on right here. I'm going to glue up two sides together and make sure the grain is oriented so they kind of move against each other. More glue is more better. So that is the cringiest clamping setup you've probably ever seen. So I realized something, that I probably should have planed these just a little bit better before I put them together, because there's a couple of spots where they just didn't actually meet up too well. So I just put a little extra pressure on there with one of the clamps. I use just about every clamp that I've got, which really isn't a whole lot, but you know what? You just gotta make do with what you got, and that's what I got. Alright, part one is complete. Just gotta level this out once we get it all together, but yeah, could have done a better job of planing, but you know what? You gotta learn from your mistakes. That's definitely a mistake I made on that. Okay, here we go. More wood. We're not gonna make the same mistake we did with the other one. We're gonna actually take a little bit more time and plane down these pieces to be a lot flatter. And wow. Yeah, quite a bit of crown going on with this guy. Luckily with softwood, it takes a little bit less effort to plane it out, so I'm going to start with this half here. We're just going to take this in sections, and yeah, I think we're going to make this work a lot better than our previous guy. Learn from your mistakes. All right, much better than before. Let's keep going and get the rest of this board done. In case you didn't know, if you've got one side of your board that's actually crowned over, so if you're looking at one side it curves like this, you can assume that the other side is going to basically do the same thing but in the opposite direction. So if one side is crowned over this way, you can assume that when you flip the board over it's going to be crowned that way. So the easiest way to plane that is to simply get a longer kana or a longer plane, whatever you want to use for it, and simply go at a diagonal angle. And you still want to try to work with the grain because that's just how these things work best. But as you go along, you're going to even it out on both sides. And after a little bit of work, you'll get a decently flat board. This is the most time-consuming part of this whole project, so I'm going to be glad when this is done. Alright, so rough planing is done. I'm going to just kind of leave this as is. I'm not going to worry about making each surface perfectly smooth. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing a modern day miracle. This board is actually pretty doggone flat, coming right from the homeless despot. That almost never happens. Just as cringy as before, got it clamped up. Going to let this sit for a while and then we'll see where we're at. This went together a lot easier than the previous two did, so looking forward to seeing how this turns out, and we'll check back in a bit. One thing I don't want to do is I don't want to put some big chips in my kana blade, so for a lot of these knotted parts I'm just going to use my regular push plane. The big kicker on this is that knots are annoying, pretty much like little stones inside the wood, and I just don't want to destroy that edge I worked so hard to make. So we're going to use this guy for some of the knotty areas on this particular piece. This is a little bit, it might be hard to see that. Got a bit of a scoop going on this side, so we're just going to go across the grain. Alright, we are cooking. Check this out. Flat, flat, flat. Had to take a little bit of twist out in this guy, so ended up planing a little more than I had originally intended, but you know what? That is okay. We're looking great with this. Doesn't have to be pretty, just needs to be practical. And that's definitely what we got in this case. Alright, we got our halves. We're going to glue them together. Here goes nothing. We are going to do our best to preserve the cringe factor of the previous two glue ups using all the clamps we got, which isn't a lot. Alright. Hi, Captain. We are ready for glue up. So not quite as cringy as before. Got a much better fit. Sometimes all you can do is fill it with glue. There were a couple of gaps here and also here that for whatever reason I just didn't get them planed properly, but I'm not terribly worried about it. Modern wood glue is pretty tough stuff, and if I end up having to screw this thing together, again, not a big deal to me. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Coming right along, making some good progress. We are going to let this sit for a good long while, let all that glue cure up nice and hard. Alright, so while that's drying, we're going to do something unique with this guy. This is actually going to be a pretty unique bench slash beam slash work thing. One of the things that it does not have is a vise. Most traditional Japanese woodworkers do not use vices. They use these little brass clamps called hiragana or harigana? Harigane? Whatever, I don't really know. Don't hold me accountable for the way I pronounce these things, because I'm probably butchering them. Since it's technically an underbench vise, this is going to be a little tricky to install. I'm going to actually chop out kind of a giant mortise slash hole sort of thing in the side here where I have this line marked. Just for some kicks and snickles, I think we could try this. This is that new hammer I showed you guys earlier. Let's try, let's see how this goes. Nothing to do. Ah, that's awesome actually. Got nothing to do until this glue dries, so might as well entertain myself a little bit. Wow, that's got some guts behind it when you smack with it. I kind of feel like Mario a little bit with this. Mario or some other video game character. Can't quite place it, but you know. And as we continue along here, thought I would mention something very interesting. There comes a time in a man's life whenever he has to do something that he doesn't like, and I'm gonna do something I really don't like, but I need your help. So, like it or not, life costs money, because you gotta buy these things called food, you gotta keep your better three-quarters happy, and best of all, you have to buy materials with which to build neat stuff with. You guys have already been incredibly supportive to me in all my endeavors so far, but I would really like your help, and I would greatly appreciate it. If you want to take a look at the Patreon account, the link is down in the description. I want to keep this stuff free, and I want to keep it available to anyone who is interested in woodworking. So that being said, I'll get off my soapbox here, and we'll get back to making something. Let's see how this Mario hammer fares against chipping out some big old mortise pieces. No, not bad. Yeah, check that. And as every carpenter from the beginning of time has said, cut many times, measure only once. Alright, much sweat and much work later. We got a big, handsome, gigantic mortise. I don't know if this is actually a mortise. If you know what this would be called, leave it in the comments down below. But hopefully you can kind of see what I'm trying to get at with this. Basically, instead of just having the vise sit on the bottom of the beam, have the face pretty much here, we're just cutting out this big, gigantic chunk so we can have it sit at a normal operating level. So after some considerable extra chopping along here, we are ready to do the final test fit. I decided to go ahead and add a recess. There we go. I decided to go ahead and add a recess to the top to kind of push this below it. So when I put a pad on here, it's a little bit closer to being perfectly flush with the surface of the top. But let's see what we got. Come on, Beth. There we go. Need a little bit of oil to loosen this thing up. It's a bit stiff, but like I said, nothing a little lubrication can't fix. Yeah, there we go. Rocking and rolling with that. So through the power of editing, hopefully you can kind of see what we're going for here. Got a stupid simple sort of an X-brace support, just a couple of screws in that, and the beam goes down at an angle to a big pile of junk, whatever. I might put those together to make it a little bit more stable in the future, but it's going to work for now. Gonna knock off these corners here, make it look a little bit nicer, but yeah, this is kind of it. Welcome to my back porch, by the way. Alright, so everything is just about right as rain, and there's always that one thing you always forget to do. I probably should have done this before, but I forgot to put some padding on the face of the vise here, but nonetheless, we are going to rectify that situation right now. Alright, so I'll probably have to replace this in the very near future, but at the moment, I'm not too worried about it. Remember, we're going for function over form here. Doesn't have to be pretty, just needs to be practical. So if you can ignore the air conditioner in the background, in the future what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some sort of system set up on this. I haven't figured it out yet, but I will. Having possibly some mortise holes with some kind of a set here that goes across so that I can actually put work on this. But for now, I just put a couple of screws in place. It's just really practical to hold the work in. But let's take a couple of cuts on this thing and let's see how it goes. All right, here goes nothing. First cuts. Yeah. Woo. Man, check that out. So the screw stop thing actually works pretty well. I might just keep that just for, just for the heck of it. All right, so just for kicks, let's try the vise. Now this is not a typical thing with a Japanese beam like I had mentioned earlier, but let's see what we got, you know. Yeah, still works. One thing I do need to adjust is I need to find a way to make this beam fit in maybe a little slot on the support horse over there. Might keep it from wiggling a little bit, but yeah, I mean that's pretty good. Let's see if we can take a little deeper cut. You have no idea how much of a difference this makes. Just having that slight elevated angle on the one end, you really feel it after you've been doing it for a while. I'm gonna make a bunch of modifications to this in the future, so this won't be the only video on this that you're gonna see. But anyway, it's getting really hot today, so I think I'm gonna call it a day for now. Thank you so much for all the support you've given, and I would appreciate any future support you could definitely offer through Patreon or even through the YouTube channel. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day. Arigato gozaimasu. Sayonara.